Good evening, everyone. I am Sarah Franklin from the Miami University Alumni Association. Tonight's webinar was organized by the Cincinnati Alumni Chapter in order to celebrate Earth Day. Joining us this evening is both Miami alumnae and sisters, Susan and Mary Kate Findley. Susan is currently a zookeeper in New Jersey, graduating with degrees in zoology, anthropology, and classical humanities. She can safely say that her mixture of science and humanities background has helped her tackle conservation from both the animal and human sides. When she's not working with sloths, she enjoys exploring New York City, writing scripts, and watching crime documentaries. Mary Kate graduated with a degree in zoology and minor in biological anthropology. She spent many years at the Cincinnati Zoo, but is currently living and working in Dallas, Texas as a primate zoologist, specializing in primates big and small, from gorillas and mandrills to titi monkeys and lemurs and a plethora in between. She recently started a new role as social media liaison for the Dallas chapter of AAZK, which is the American Association of Zookeepers. And pre-COVID, she loved traveling, but is now enjoying hikes nearby in state parks with her husband and her pup. So thank you both for joining us, Mary Kate and Susan.
Of course, thanks for having us. We're excited.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start off our questions here for this evening. The first round of questions that I have are going to be about your time at Miami and how you ended up doing what you are doing now. So, Susan, if I want to direct the first question at you, it would be, why did you choose Miami? What was your major? And what activities did you participate when you were on campus?
Great question. So why I chose Miami? So I'm from Ohio, was born and raised in Ohio, specifically Cincinnati. So I liked the idea of going to a school at least within driving distance from me. But more importantly, I was already interested in the field of animal keeping. And so I wanted to find a college that could help me with that. And Miami was one of the few universities with a zoology degree. Now, they don't have it anymore. They retired it while I was there, but I still got to keep it and take it and use the name. So I was specifically looking for a zoology degree, and Miami had it. So I applied and fell in love.
Mary Kate, I'm going to direct the same kind of question to you. What made you choose Miami? Was it the fact that your sister was also interested and it was local, or do you have a different reason?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of crazy that we both kind of followed into the same field and the same passion. And our parents are actually Miami mergers. And so it was always kind of a family tradition, Miami was. And so, like Susan said, it had that program that we were really interested in. And another bonus was that it was within driving distance of Cincinnati and the Cincinnati Zoo. So when we were working part-time jobs there at the zoo, or say we had some behavioral research that we were doing about animals, the zoo was really accessible. So we had a really great practical avenue that was so close to the university. So I think that was always also a really big reason and a really good advantage.
Wonderful. Mary Kate, did you have anybody who particularly influenced you to follow this career path?
Yeah, so we were actually kind of reminiscing on where we got to this point and kind of what journey took us. And we have kind of similar ones, but I think we had a little bit of different influences. Animals are definitely in our blood. You know, my mom grew up on a dairy farm, and on my dad's side are a lot of animal lovers who participate in rescue and rehabilitation. So animals are in our blood, but like Susan said, we're from Cincinnati, and the Cincinnati Zoo has always just been a big part of our community. And so I can definitely say without a doubt, one of my biggest influences was Thane Maynard, the director of the Cincinnati Zoo. And he's just such a big advocate in the community, and they work so closely with the community, and it feels like home. So I think having Thane, who's just this charismatic, who's always a part of the communication. You know, you hear him on the radio and see him on billboards, and you hear his voice in the airport, and he's just everywhere. And he's like people are all, Steve Irwin's a big influence for a lot of my peers, but for sure, Thane Maynard has been my influence. And, you know, the first time that we were able to get on in Cincinnati Zoo and kind of see a little bit more of how the behind the scenes worked, just fell in love and knew that was where we wanted to be.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Susan, yeah, ask you the same thing.
It's funny because, like Mary Kate mentioned, we grew up in the city, in the suburbs. So we didn't kind of realize that there was that kind of avenue. Like, we knew the zoo was there, but we didn't, you're young. You don't know that that's like a career, a lifestyle kind of thing. It's funny, when I was really young, like 4 years old, my dream job was to be a cowgirl lifeguard who saved the rainforest. So there was a lot that I wanted to do in my life. And actually, safe to say, I've kind of encompass that with my career now. But so that was kind of my goal job. That was my dream job. But I didn't really know how to get there. And in sixth grade, I distinctly remember this. We were asked to write a paper about a career. And I looked in the dictionary, looked at, the career books and things that they handed us. And I found the word zoologist. And I thought that was the coolest word. It started with a Z. It had the zoo in it, which I loved. And so I wrote my paper on zoology, and my dad saw that paper and he was like, oh, like a direction, great. And, we're in the community, like Mary Kate said, Cincinnati Zoo's all over the community. And we found out that there was a volunteer program for teenagers. So it was perfect because I wrote this paper in sixth grade. And then right after that, seventh grade, eighth grade, I was volunteering at the Cincinnati Zoo during my summers. So that kind of definitely formed my interest.
Yeah. So a question that kind of goes along those lines, if you guys were both volunteering through high school and things like that, and then going into the degree that you guys both did, what was your career path like after that, and how did that kind of carry you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I can start the answer on that one. It's actually, many people may not know this, but it's a very competitive field to get into zookeeping in particular, and into the animal care field. And so you really have to be willing to do unpaid internships, do a lot of volunteering to get your foot in the door. But it's very important to just gain any sort of experience and knowledge and practical experience that you can. So for me, after doing volunteer work, and then doing part-time education, overnight programs, outreach programs, things like that while I was still in college and in the summers. Once I graduated, I did a little bit of that type of part-time work in wild encounters and stuff through the summer. And then I did an internship in Washington, D.C. at the National Zoo with their great apes and other primates. And that was really kind of like an important point. You really have to be willing to travel and relocate and explore other areas that might not necessarily be your home, just because of how limited the job market is. So I did an internship there, and then I came back to Cincinnati Zoo, where they have an AmeriCorps program, and worked a bit more closer with the schools and the school programming with animals and things like that at that point in time. And then after I had worked there, I relocated to Dallas and got a full-time job as a zookeeper in the children's area and with a multitude of animals, and then was able to work my way up to becoming a primate keeper, which is where I've always wanted to be. So it definitely was a path of moving, doing some unpaid work, getting your foot in the door, but it's all about getting that experience and perseverance.
Yeah, my path was similar, but then I went off to the East Coast instead of the South. So I, most important, got my bachelor's degree. That's the very first thing that any career in this field looks for, is they look for a bachelor's degree, and then they look for experience second. So I had my degree, so time to work on the experience. I had it previously at Cincinnati Zoo with, like, as Mary Kate mentioned, volunteering and internships and part-time jobs there. But I really wanted to get a different perspective on how different zoos function. So that way, if I was to ultimately come back to Cincinnati, I could offer different ideas, different ways of doing things, or perhaps the same ways of doing things. But I really wanted to experience conservation ideas also that was really important to me elsewhere, because I knew exactly what Cincinnati Zoo was doing to help animals both in their care and out of their care, how they were helping their communities, but I wanted to see how other places did it well. And to see if I could also use my perspective from Cincinnati, which is such a massive zoo. And I really didn't understand it at the time, how great of a zoo that is, and how much money and time they put towards conservation and messaging and all that good stuff. So I definitely took that beautiful treasure trove that they gave me and applied it to my following jobs. So I applied out of Ohio, didn't even look at any Ohio zoos. There's plenty here, but I didn't want to. So I started off at the National Zoo, but I wasn't sure I wanted to do zookeeping specifically. I wasn't positive yet. And so I wanted to try the science side of zoos. So I actually worked in the reproduction labs at Smithsonian and worked on developing techniques for preserving embryos. So that way we have a cryo-biobank there. It's a frozen zoo, ready to save the planet if needed. And so I was working there. But I found it wasn't exactly what I needed. I needed the human connection as well. I needed to feel like I could inspire people every day. So I thank them for their time. They thanked me for my time. And I started volunteering as a keeper. And then I got a full-time position at the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore. But it wasn't quite my perfect fit either. And then so eventually I got this full-time position here in New Jersey. So just like Mary Kate, couple of state hoppings to get to the point.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a perfect transition into kind of discussing more of what you guys are currently doing. And Mary Kate, if you could start off by telling us what you're doing now, where you currently work, and a little bit more about those primates and animals that you're working with.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned previously, I live in Dallas, and so I am down here in South where it's nice and hot. And that's definitely a perspective that I had to bring into work with my animal care. So more specifically, I do work with a lot of primates. So I work with a couple troops of gorillas. I work with gibbons and mandrills. We have lots of little monkeys like colobus monkeys and teddy monkeys, and spectacled langurs, which is one of the most rare animals that we have at the zoo. And so on a day-to-day basis, we're just making sure that we're providing the best lives for these animals. So we're making sure that they are getting all of their needs from food, water, shelter, habitat that fits what they would be getting in the wild. We make sure, their food is restaurant quality. We spend a lot of time giving them a clean, healthy space to live. We give them something novel in their day every day, some sort of change in their environment, make them use their heads, get some exercise, engage their senses, and all these natural behaviors. So we really understand these animals, what they would be in the wild, and then we try to apply that knowledge in providing the best life and care for them at the zoo. And in addition, we bring in interns and mentor them and are able to do some more research with our animals. But kind of on the flip side, we want to make sure that we use that time that we have to engage with people and inspire them and talk with them and really kind of bring that animal connection, because once you connect with an animal, you care about them. And once you care about them, you want to help them and save them. And so we're able to kind of foster that connection, and the animals that are here in the zoo, they're the ambassadors for their wild counterparts and have to teach them and show them kind of what's going on in the quote unquote wild. And we'll kind of talk about this a little bit later about how, humans have touched every bit of this earth. And so it's not as simple as having animals out in the wild. We really need to make sure we're doing our part. So one of my favorite parts is being able to engage with visitors and tell them a little bit about the conservation they can do right here in Texas. Some of the really great things that we're doing with our work with Texas horned lizards is a great example, and releasing them into the wild. All of our creek cleanups and things like that to just clean up our environment and provide clean homes for animals that are right here. And also share a little bit about our conservation partners across the world. And so that's also what we do every day, help and inspire people. and share our passion.
Wonderful. Susan, same question to you. What can you tell us more about what you're doing on a day-to-day now and what kind of animals you get to work with in New Jersey? Different climate for sure.
Yeah, Mary Kate definitely covered. Even though we're at different institutions, she's in the warm South. I'm in the East Coast where we get every little bit of weather. Although to be fair, Dallas got a little show of snow as well, and cold. But we still got the blizzard. We still got feet and feet and feet. But yeah, so I work at a smaller institution, so they function a little bit differently than the larger zoos that everybody seems to know, like San Diego or like Columbus, Cincinnati. Even Disney's Animal Kingdom. Those are really large institutions where people really get to specialize in something. So at my zoo, on the other hand, we're a little bit smaller, so I get to work with everything. So I do get to work with primates just like Mary Kate. I get to work with tamarins and spider monkeys, but I also get to work with reptiles. So I get to work with lots of snakes and alligators. I get to work with carnivores. I work with mountain lions and ocelots and bobcats but also small little things too, like little bugs, and big things like bison. So I get to work with a little bit of everything, which is really, really fun for me. It keeps me on my toes. It keeps me thinking, keeps me guessing, keeps me working. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. Did I answer that? I think
yeah, you absolutely
got the everyday part pretty well.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you guys have different experiences and that kind of. Susan, can you tell me more about what you find rewarding about being able to work in a smaller institution versus a bigger one, and then some of the challenges maybe you face too?
Yeah, so definitely some of the most rewarding part of working in a smaller institution is you get to kind of you see people experience the zoo in its entirety, and you can really help like guide their experience and see their look of awe. And as they come around, you're usually not as far behind the scenes as you would be at larger institutions, so we're right there, right near them, so we're pretty hands-on for a lot of informal chats as well as formal chats. So I love like getting to see like people just like gasp of excitement when they see an animal for the first time that they've never seen before in their life. So I get to witness that a lot, which is really, really awesome. Other rewarding things, I don't know. I'm just like, I love working with them one-on-one with training. So I get to do a lot of training with the animals where we keep them just mentally and physically engaged, encourage them to do behaviors that they would do in the wild. And that ultimately helps them with their healthcare. So I love being able to help on vet day and see the animals participate in their healthcare. That's so rewarding for me, that it's an experience that's not fully negative. It's something that they participate, they have the choice, and it helps them and helps us in the long run. So that's definitely one of the most rewarding parts of my job. Some of the challenges of working in a smaller zoo is I don't have a lot of the government funding that larger institutions have. So we have to get a little creative with things. We have to wait a long while for some things. So that can be pretty tough, but nonetheless, all of our animals are really well cared for. don't that, but like it takes a while, for like say new uniforms for me, something like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Mary Kate, same question to you is what are some of the rewarding things that you have, and some of your biggest challenges being at a larger institution?
Yeah. So I think one of the most rewarding things Susan kind of mentioned, I'm able to specialize a little bit more and to work with the animals that I really, really want to, and I can spend really good quality time with them every day. Like Susan said, she gets to work with a lot of animals and work around and kind of move around, which that variety of your day is always wonderful, and I think that's a big advantage that she has. But it also, kind of on the flip side, I can really, a lot of my days are in a row with the same animals. And so I think the really valuable part, and I know she has really great relationships with her animals. She was talking about her training. And so I think that's also the most valuable thing for me is the relationships that I'm able to build with the animals. at the zoo, and I get to work with my dream animals, my favorite animals. I will say up and down, gorillas are the best animals in the world, and I really truly think they are. And so I'm blessed every day to be around them and have a working relationship with them and the trust with them. So I think that's definitely the most rewarding, and seeing them just grow and thrive. We have a cute little family and some very handsome bachelor boys. So it's really wonderful to be able to watch them grow and interact with one another and their relationships as well. So that's been very, very valuable. And I think one of the challenges is what can it make you a challenge? I don't know, maybe some people don't like, I don't mind being near the big city. I know some people would rather just be out in nature and kind of away from all the hubbub and just go in and be in outdoors. And I definitely do love being out in the outdoors. Like I said in my bio, I like to go out on hikes and things and explore the natural world around me. So I kind of get the balance. I get a good balance of being able to, the city's accessible, but I can still get my outdoor time. But for some people, that could be a disadvantage working at a bigger zoo. And maybe, it's a pretty big company. I think a lot of people, when they think of zoos, they think of just zookeepers and maybe vets and maybe like the board of directors or something like that. But especially when you have a big zoo like Cincinnati, like San Diego and Animal Kingdom, in the zoo that I work at, there's a lot more people than just zookeepers and vets. There's people who work in the marketing department and development department and grant writing. We have people who specialize in water. We have people who specialize in other maintenances. And so we have this huge support staff that isn't just zookeepers, but we have so many different people involved and making sure that everything's a success. So sometimes you definitely do have that bigger corporation culture in that environment where it doesn't seem as small of a family as maybe a smaller zoo does. So you might have to work a little bit more to talk and communicate and get your ideas pushed down the line just because it is such a bigger place. So I would say maybe that's kind of something that's trickier to work on.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into the next portion. This is another question for Mary Kate. Susan and I and us from Cincinnati are probably used to the snow, but what did you guys do to prepare in Dallas for the snow that was to come? What did everybody have to pitch in your operation?
Yeah, so for those of you who, I'm sure everybody heard a few months ago, but for those of you who didn't, there was this huge ice and snowstorm that hit Dallas, and it's in a way that we haven't had down here in Texas in quite some time. And as I mentioned earlier, we're a southern zoo, we're a southern place, so we are built for heat and making sure all of our buildings are help dispel heat and stay cool. So that's what everything is built for. We're not built for insulation or infrastructures, not made for de-icing and handling those large power loads and struggles. And so that was definitely something that our city dealt with. We dealt with a lot of power outages. We dealt with a lot of water outages. And that was a big struggle that we had to deal with at the zoo. Luckily, we had some idea that this was coming, so we were able to plan ahead of time kind of what we could and get kind of an emergency game plan in action. So one thing was, animals have to be cared for every single day. We are here to give these animals their best life possible, which means we work 365 days. We work Christmas and Thanksgiving and weekends. We are there every day, and we're going to be there through a snowstorm and ice. And so we planned to have ride-out teams where keepers and vet staff were there overnight, and we would bring in our stuff and just hunker down and make sure that we didn't have to deal with dangerous conditions, that the city was not prepared to clear up those roadways to make them safe. So we just hunkered down and stayed at the zoo. And that enabled us also to make sure that our heat sources were working, that our power was working, and that if things were closing down, that we were right there to pivot and make an emergency plan. So we had lots of heaters, we had lots of generators, and for some of our animals where heat was failing, we were able to relocate them into buildings that were fully functional and great. So we were able to make sure that the welfare of our animals was consistent at all times, and that we were constantly giving them the care and attention that they needed. So it was definitely might be the hardest week that I've had in my career. Very exhausting, but it's a labor of love every day. So yeah, that was a struggle. Lots of generators and heat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And that is absolutely, truly amazing. And Susan, again, I know that we're kind of used to that weather up here, and maybe New Jersey had a little bit of a plan that they've had to institute before, unlike Dallas. So if you could touch just on what a day-to-day looks like for you in a more normal world, or even what it looks like with feet of snow and what 9 to 5 or whatever kind of hours you are at the zoo.
Yeah, absolutely. So day to day. So I start a little later than Mary Kate. So my day is 8 to 5. I know Mary Kate starts at 7 in the morning. A lot of zoos are on the earlier side. 7. I know National Zoo in DC is 6:30 in the morning. They start, and oftentimes we get there early so we can get as much done in the morning before we open up to the public. So it's kind of a race to the front door. Some days not, but just depending, especially on a vet day. So it's every single morning we go in there and we check on our animals, make sure that they're healthy, that they're there, where they actually, where they should be. And if they're not, figure that out. But yeah, start off their day making sure you check their food, give them nice, beautiful restaurant quality food, as Mary Kate mentioned. And then we clean up their space, remove all the stuff that could fester and get bacteria or things like that. Take that away, and then we put in new stuff. So we put in things that will physically engage them. So encourage them to climb if they're climbers, encourage them to swim if they're swimmers. So we might hide their food in different places to encourage them to hunt. We might put, especially for the primates, we might put things in like puzzle balls or feeder balls, so that way they have to work out a problem in their day. But we'll also give them, if we got some snoozers. So carnivores, people always come to the zoo and they're like, why are they sleeping? And I was like, because they're a carnivore. So carnivores are notorious sleepers. So they save a bunch of energy and then they use it really, really quick for hunting, and then they can serve all day again. So I got to make sure my carnivores have lots of comfy spaces to rest in public view, but also out of public view. And then we do a lot of cleaning of dishes. So many dishes. I was on dish duty today, but we do that, and we also do training, as I mentioned. So we work with them one-on-one. So specifically for behaviors like for vet day, but also for separating from different group from one to another, from shifting onto different things. So if we do have an emergency, like Mary Kate mentioned, that we're not prepared for, if you get a sudden storm, we got to be able to shift those animals, move those animals really easy. And if they're already used to doing that on a day-to-day basis, makes your life so much easier. And then we do projects. So we do things that can make it even better for the animals. So we might work on a really difficult piece of enrichment. So we might drill together, lots of coconuts in a string to make something for them to work with and solve. So projects, I know right now we're prepping for the spring. So we've got seasons. So every season comes with a new set of challenges and a new set of problems that we have to prepare for. So for spring, a lot of our animals are starting to shift from indoor spaces to outdoor spaces. So we're making sure every single day that our outdoor spaces, all the branching is secure. We had a really harsh winter. We had a really harsh blizzard come through that we also rode out. And I spent the night at the zoo there as well. And so we made sure things were intact, but the animals weren't outside yet. So now we're going back in, making sure all the branching is secure, that there's no way that they could escape or hurt themselves. We want to make sure that, so that's what we're doing right now. Lots of spring projects, getting things ready for everything to go outside, making sure all of our pools fill and are algae free and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So Susan, in doing all of this and spending the entire day with the animals, do you get to form a relationship with them? I mean, would you say that you're close to the animals that you work with in a way?
Absolutely. I definitely think that there are animals that absolutely know who we are, and we are part of their family troop. We're part of their social dynamics. So definitely, there's definitely animals that really do, that we definitely form a relationship. Now, there's some who they don't mind as long as they get that banana. They are happy. I'm talking about roaches. The roaches don't know who I am. They really don't. I can try every day to work with that roach, but it doesn't know who I am.
I get that. That's I understand. Mary Kate, same question to you. You work with primates who are unlike roaches and have a little bit more of that personality and camaraderie. Do you feel like you have that relationship, especially with the gorillas? I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely think, and especially primates as our closest living relatives, they're highly, highly intelligent, biggest brain for their body size. So not only are they thinking about everything at all times, and you got to really be, cognizant of what you're doing every day because they are watching you and taking it all in. Very smart. And so it's pretty amazing to work with such intelligent animals. And it definitely sometimes, you're like, oh, wow, like they definitely understand what I'm saying or what I'm doing. So, but yeah, there's definitely, I would say, I don't want to, it's hard. I don't ever want to say I have favorites, right? But we do have two youngster gorillas at our zoo that are 2 and 3 years old. And I think they are pretty wonderful and pretty perfect. And I definitely would say I have a really good relationship with our youngest kiddo, our 2-year-old. And so he is a very playful little guy. And, he'll come in, and as soon as he sees me, he starts chest beating because he wants to play. And so we'll just run around and make silly faces and just be kind of crazy and make loud noises. And he's going with me back and forth. And so, just being able to do that and have that bond with that little guy. And, I know when he sees me that he knows exactly who I am and he's excited to do it. And so that's one example of like just a close relationship that I have. Also, my one of the mandrills that I work with, for those of you who don't know, that's Rafiki from The Lion King. They have that gorgeous blue face and red down their nose and kind of they're colorful behind, all those blues and pinks and reds. So those are our mandrills. And so we have one young adult male, and every time he sees me, he sprints from the other side and just gives me the biggest smile. The mandrill smile is real cute. And so every time we just sprint and give each other big smiles, and that's our greeting. And so I think that's definitely a really rewarding part of my day.
Yeah, that's how I would want to start my morning, honestly. I don't see why I wouldn't.
Go to work and they're clearly very happy to see you. So that's always good.
It really makes me miss my penguins. At my last institution, I worked with penguins, and they really form pair bonds. They just like hunker up to you. If they really love you, they really love you, and they'll try to get a little frisky with you. But yeah, penguins, man.
I love that. That is great. It's great to hear that you guys have that relationship, and it's just as rewarding for you as it is for the animals when you get to work with them. And our next transition is kind of into talking about conservation at your locations, and sometimes it's misunderstood a zoo's purpose, and whether it's entertainment versus the actual conservation and things that are going on. So if we could discuss more about how important zoos are for fostering those connections to our environment and the animals themselves in education. So Mary Kate, the first question I'll ask to you is, why are zoos so important for our environment?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. And so I mentioned a little bit earlier that, you go to zoos and you see these animals and you make a connection with them. And like, for example, one of our gorillas, he likes to jump scare people. And once you have that, you're like, oh, that was awesome. He was great. and you care about them and you want to take those action items to help them out in the wild. And so you might read the signs more, engage with one of our staff, one of our conservation engagement workers, and learn a little bit about that conservation. And so the great part about zoos is that we are all about conservation and our messaging is all about it. And so we have programs that, you know, you can do boots on the ground right here and let's get started. Let's go. We'll do creek cleanups. We'll go drive out and do some sea turtle conservation. We'll do some bat conservation over here in a different part of Texas. We provide an avenue for different types of recycling, for example. So one big program that a lot of zoos do is a cell phone recycling program. So cell phone contains a mineral in it called coltan, and it's mined very heavily in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is where a lot of gorillas live and a lot of other really amazing wildlife. And so a lot of that land is being stripped and mined for this very specific mineral for our electronics. And so a lot of zoos, and check your local zoo, will have cell phone recycling, and you can bring that in, and that directly goes to help save animals. So a really great thing that zoos do is provide those avenues for people to do locally. But we also have already started that step in making those connections and working with conservation on the ground out across the world. So if you're like, okay, I really, really want to help gorillas, but I don't know the first place to get started. Where do I look? What's an organization I can turn to? And the great thing is that you can easily find who we partner with, who we support. So we can show you towards the Diane Fossey International Organization and what they do for the mountain gorillas, and also working with the local communities and educating people in the anti-poaching and anti-bushmeat that they're pushing for. We can show you towards GRACE, which is the Gorilla Rehabilitation and Conservation Education Center, which also, like I said, focuses on gorillas and works on rescuing baby gorillas from the bushmeat trade and rehabilitating them in order to release them into the wild. So a lot of zoos have great partnerships. They've done that work, so you can easily go and help those individual programs that they have already partnered with. And you just even coming to a zoo, coming to your local zoo, every dollar goes towards animals. These are nonprofit organizations, and every dollar, every dime goes towards animals, whether it's the ones that are in the care there for their everyday life, or improving their lives and expanding habitats and putting in really amazing things, or extra money will go to those conservation partners out in the wild that are actively conserving animals. And kind of, you mentioned the environment in that question and how zoos work for the environment. And conservation and environmental awareness and care go hands in hand, because animals can't survive no matter how much money you're putting towards them. If you're building up a population and breeding them, say, for the Przewalski horses, for example, there was just a dozen out in the wild. And if we're trying to rebuild that population and reintroduce them, if there's no environment for them to go into, if there's nothing clean and safe, there's not food, water, plenty of safe habitat and shelter, then that is all for nothing. And so conservation, environmental care, and stewardship really has to go hand in hand. And so I think that's also a big message that a lot of zoos are going to be working to communicate and say, okay, here are some ways that we can really help the environment, whether it's, you know, you hear reduce, reuse, recycle, but I think it's really important that we think about reduce. What are ways that we can reduce kind of our materialism and plastic use and really get rid of single-use stuff? I would say reduce and then replace. What are things that we can replace in our lives to really eliminate that waste? Because any waste is going straight into the environment. And then when we have time, what are things that we can do to care for our environment? And so there's a couple great programs that zoos have put on and really help spread that mission. And so it's things such as I mentioned, the cell phone recycling, but there's also things looking for sustainable palm oil products. Palm oil is a really huge problem that's blowing up in the world, and it's For example, I would say orangutans are kind of the face of losing all of their habitat is being devastated for these palm oil plantations. And that's eliminating variety is so important in nature. And when you have single stand trees, that's not going to help animals. So you can download the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, I believe, has the Sustainable Palm Oil app. And then there's also a really good one. Susan can talk a little bit about the Seafood Watch app. I think is a really great resource for people.
Yeah, that was a lot of really great information and great for our listeners to know. And Susan, the next question is for you is benefits aside from enrichment and things like that you provide to your animals, but benefits like those apps and education that is provided that helps those animals that you work with on a day-to-day.
Yeah. Sorry, I was
you're fine.
Question. Yeah, so one thing I do want to state that if nobody takes anything else from this, I want people to realize that the wild is not the wild anymore. It's when people think of the wild, they think of a very romanticized, very storybook version of the planet Earth being this very large, untouched oasis, but it's really not. So if you're unaware, we've entered into another epoch. We're in the Anthropocene, where humans have really impacted every single inch of this planet. So you go anywhere in the world and humans have touched it. You go down to the trench, they found plastic there. You go to the top of Mount Everest, human waste is there. So we are really, really tied to the environment. So I think what's really important about zoos and how we help out animals is that we have essentially an ark for these animals, right? So we have a place for them to be while the wild is getting back to a sustainable place for them. Because right now, with the way we're treating the wild, it's very unsustainable. We're not sharing our resources harmoniously. So we need to figure out how to do that. So Mary Kate mentioned a lot of like the reducing, the replacing, the reusing, all of that stuff definitely helps us share our habitat with the animals, because humans are here and we also deserve food, right? We deserve a safe place to sleep and we deserve clean water, but so do the animals in our backyard. So zoos definitely do really great work with having animals in their zoo, like I said, as an ark, because a lot of animals, as most of you are probably familiar, are facing an extinction. So with this Anthropocene is a massive 6 extinction where animals are disappearing at an alarming rate that's mostly due to human influence and problems. So what we do is because a lot of animals are extinct in the wild, we have those animals in our institutions and we are raising them and keeping them and have them reproduce genetically healthy individuals. So we work with a lot of our endangered animals with that. We have a species survival plan for every single animal. If you see a baby animal at a zoo, it was planned with a team of people behind it, researchers, geneticists, vet staff, animal keeper staff. It's very well planned and thought out because we don't want to overbreed the animals to the point that we don't have the capacity for them. But we want to have enough that if the environment's ready for them to go back, they can. So as Mary Kate mentioned, we did that with the Przewalski horses. There was only 12 individuals there, and now there's thousands of them roaming Mongolia. We did that right here in the United States with the California condor. So there was only about 27 individuals. We brought them all in from the wild, bred them at the Los Angeles Zoo, San Diego Zoo, and released them back into the wild. So those guys are steadily increasing and hoping to get off the critically endangered list. My own old zoo, the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore, we specialized in amphibians, actually. So we had the Panamanian golden dart frog, which if you went to Panama, were just everywhere waving to you from the waterfalls. But unfortunately, there's no more because of a fungal disease introduced by hikers' shoes. So make sure you clean your shoes, guys. If you go hiking in different parts of the world, clean your shoes. But now we have thousands of individuals, and we are working on a cure for that fungal disease, so that way we can get it passed through the line, down the line. We know what we're talking about with vaccines now, right, guys? And And so we can reintroduce them back into the wild. So we've had a lot of those really successful projects right here in the United States. The black-footed ferret is an example of that. And then in Cincinnati helped with the American burying beetle. So lots of important work that's used to do for animals that is not just what's on grounds necessarily, but keeping them safe, alive, healthy. So that way, as humans figure out our place in nature and maybe how we can share nature, we can do that better in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And it looks like we've got some live questions that are starting to roll in. So I want to make sure that we're able to answer questions of people that are joining us and that are registered. So our first one that we have here is that I'm a zoology major and I want to help with animals and do my part to help them, but I don't know if there's a particular job which does that the best. Would being a zookeeper be the best way to work with animals and fulfill this role? Or is there another career path that you admire and wish that you could be a part of that would fulfill this same need in the world?
Absolutely. I will say, zookeeping is a vocation. It's a very, very tough career. It takes a lot out of you physically, mentally. You're spending a lot of time away from your family. You're spending a lot of time away from friends. So you have to be prepared for that. And sometimes you think you are, and then you find out that you're not. So definitely what I would recommend is using your time, especially if you're still in school, use your summers and explore. Go to get different internships at different institutions in different areas. So of course there's the obvious zookeeping internship, but try out education. Try out marketing. There's marketing internships in the zoo field as well. Try out the science. I tried the science. I found it wasn't for me, but I didn't know that, until I tried. And I definitely, they impress me so much, all the hard work that they do. So I wish I could do that. Obviously I tried, but it wasn't for me. So definitely go out. And even over, if you're at Miami, J-term, I know museums have internships over that J-term as well. So definitely use your free time, because this field loves to see that you use your free time for anything with animals, really anything with animals, because if you spend your free time caring about them, then you're gonna exude that when you're at work, and people like visitors will feel that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead. Okay.
With another recommendation, and J-term, that was a great recommendation to really travel during that. And I think J-term could be a great way to travel internationally and see what conservation is being done every day out in the field, and getting field research work, maybe going out and doing a research project and seeing the animals in the wild and doing animal behavior, working with local communities and how they're able to cohabitate with these animals, or kind of what's being done with education locally and with conservation locally and with behavioral research locally. So I recommend trying to do some field research and just seeing what's going on across the world. And that's definitely a career path that you can take. So you're wondering if zookeeping, definitely every single person I can say with 1,000% certainty is in the zookeeping field because they love animals, absolutely love animals. And so there's definitely different ways that you can do that. So one thing could be continuing your education, becoming a PhD student, going out and doing that research, hands-on, feet on the ground, and doing it. You can be in parks, you can be rangers, you can be in rescue and rehabilitation. I know for a fact there's often raptor or birds of prey rehabilitation centers in a lot of cities. That's a great place. Or at your local shelters and working with those animals. You can go the vet route, you can go vet tech route. But like Susan, and I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, if that's the mission that you feel in your heart, but like Susan said, say you do an animal care internship and realize that physical labor is just not for you. But that mission is still so important to you. You're really able to find different ways to do support and maybe work in development, maybe work in grant writing, work in marketing, or exhibit design, enrichment design, things like that. You can work in horticulture if you still love being on grounds and help cultivate an environment for these animals in their habitats and throughout the zoo, providing them with fresh browse and greens and leaves to eat. For our big herbivores, I know for a fact, love all those fresh cuts that our horticulture department provides. So there's lots of avenues that you can definitely, as long as that mission's in your heart, there's something for you to do.
And I do want to add on one thing I just thought of is also, you don't have to be in this field to make a difference in the environment, the world, animals, all that good stuff. There's a way that, like, in any career that you can help out, you just have to kind of finesse your way into doing that. Because if it is your mission, but like, let's say you've figured out, while you were 6 years into law school, right? Like, you're like, I spent so much of my time to this. Well, you can help with like environmental law. I mean, that's a very easy kind of, well, not really easy, because if you didn't study environmental law, but what I want to say is, you don't have to have a biology degree in order to help animals. You can do it every single day, and you can help your institution, wherever you work, make a difference in the world as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That answered what our next question was, is what people can do in their everyday life to help. And I think that's great. And, there's even the smallest things are progressing us in the world and things like that. So to move back a little bit more to your zookeeper lives and what you guys do on a day-to-day, what are some of the oddest and unexpected surprises that you've come across in being zookeepers?
That's a tough one.
Well, it is tough.
Susan kind of mentioned, I mean, we've been in this environment, we were volunteering from the age of 13. So we were very well aware of what this environment was. So there's not a lot that I would say came as like a shock.
Mm-hmm.
Get strong, muscles, physical labor.
It's a tough question, because it's part of our job to make sure unexpected things don't happen, right? Like if something really unexpected happened, I didn't do my job correctly. So people always ask me, like, have you been bitten by an animal? Have you been scratched? This, that, or the other. And it's like, hopefully not too much. Because if I'm not reading the animal's behavior properly, then I could get myself hurt. I could get my coworkers hurt. I could get that animal hurt. So I don't know, unexpected.
I think maybe
a baby too early, an early baby when you weren't expecting a baby to come.
I would say just sometimes how surprising those connections really are and how closely bonded you get with those animals. I would say that's one of the toughest parts of this job. And I think anybody who works with animals in any capacity understands this. I mean, the people at home, who have pets, and we outlive our pets, right? And so that's the same at a zoo for most of these animals, most of them. There's some very long-lived animals, but, we outlive them. And so you create these bonds and you give these animals the best lives possible. So I think that's probably been one of the hardest parts. It's just that we outlive them, and so your heart breaks and you lose a friend and a coworker, kind of, and that a big part of your day. But also, you have to show up every day and give 100%, even if you're heartbroken. There's a bunch of other animals that need all your love and attention and care, so you need to show up every day, no matter how you're feeling. So I think that's kind of something that's a little unexpected. Is kind of when you're like that first animal who passes, just how much your heart breaks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally understand that. I'm sure people at home do with pets and things like that you form those relationships.
And you also meet people. I mean, that's lots of people like zoos. So you get to meet really cool, fun people. For example, let's just do a brag. Let's just do it. I met Adele. I gave her a tour, We fed a tamandua together. I put little mealworms on her hands, and then I ate one in front of her just to shock her, and she was shocked. It's restaurant quality, I swear. But so you can meet cool. So that was unexpected. I wasn't expecting her that day. That was shocking, and I was not cute. Oh my gosh, we only got like 2-minute warning that she was coming. So we all like ran to the bathroom and like tried to like our hair and like do a quick sweep of everything. Like, and you know, that was unexpected.
There you go. That is a great example. Absolutely. So our final question for the evening that has come in is, what can people do to support their local zoos? What can they do more of to support their local zoos? I know that we've touched on that in a lot of different ways, but maybe, you know, when they're coming to the zoo that day, is there something that they can do while they're there that they can support their animals there?
Yeah, I can touch on something real quick. I recommend getting a membership at your local zoo. I think that pays for it after a couple visits. I think that's a really big boost for us. And especially when the pandemic hit this past year and a lot of zoos had to close down. You know, like I mentioned, we are a nonprofit, but we do depend on people coming through the door and helping support us. And so memberships and buying memberships were a really big part of supporting us and helping us stay afloat. So I would say getting a membership at your local zoo, attending the events that they put on. I know a lot of zoos put on some really fun events. You know, if you're a young professional, I know sometimes they'll have learning or development opportunities, but they also put on really fun concerts, or Brew at the Zoo, Spring Blooms, Tunes and Blooms is a fun one. Hallzooine, Festival of Lights. So there's things year round and events that are happening year round that are really fun, and you can just go, and it supports local businesses. So oftentimes local breweries, local restaurants that are there. So not only are you supporting your zoo by attending these events, but you're also supporting local businesses. And I would say that's one really great way to help them, is just, you know, they're putting out some really great things for you, so to take advantage of it. And just when you're there, sometimes you go to the gift shop, they'll ask you to round up for conservation. Any donation, honestly, is a big help. And oftentimes some zoos will put out like Amazon wish lists. I remember Christmas time at the National Zoo, you know, for our gorillas, we put out an animal wish list, and people just get on Amazon and buy them some Christmas gifts. And those types of things go a long way. So I would say donations are huge. Memberships are huge. Just when you go, being supportive. And also depending on the zoo and kind of how they're supported. I know, for example, Cincinnati Zoo oftentimes has what the tax levy comes up. So just supporting them with your boats too. That's really huge.
Yeah. And if you are on grounds, my 2 things that I would recommend: first, read the signage. The signage has so much information. And so sometimes it's okay to be distracted by the animal and to see that animal and get so excited, get so like about it. But then also take the time to look at the signage next to it. Like find out, you know, what that animal is, what it does, why it's doing what it's doing, where it's from in the wild. And I guarantee you, most zoos, I've been to many across the world, and all those signs have something that you can do to help those animals. So if you aren't lucky enough to run into a staff member who hands you off all this beautiful information, a lot of the signage has that for you. So make sure you try to read the signs. And if you have young children, encourage them to read it, practice their reading, and maybe they'll get something out of that as well. But if you can meet a zookeeper, I definitely recommend attending those keeper chats. Every single zoo has a map or an app. Go on that and see when those keeper chat times are. Unfortunately, my zoo has ceased them with COVID, but I know Mary Kate Zoo does still do them. So check out your local zoo, see if they still have them. But I learn, and I'm in the field, and I still go to other zoos, and I learn so much by just attending the keeper chats. It's so funny. The first thing we do, like we'll go to a zoo in London, or Portugal, and we just get the map and we go, okay, we want to hit this keeper chat, this keeper chat, this keeper chat, this keeper chat. That's what we as zookeepers do when we go to other zoos. And from that, I found out about sustainable seafood. So if you're a seafood eater, there's an app called Seafood Watch. I found out of that because of a keeper chat, and it helps me make sustainable choices at home. Also, what you can do is send your kids to camp. Encourage them to come to the zoo and away from their parents, right? Some time on their own. Get a little messy with nature. because we let them get messy and dirty and up close and personal with the animals. So yeah, if you're at the zoo, send your kids to camp. They're awesome.
Perfect. That pretty much wraps us up. So, thank you to our audience for joining us. And of course, a huge thank you to you, Susan, and you, Mary Kate, for your time tonight for the Cincinnati and thank you to the Cincinnati chapter for putting this together so that we could hear from you ladies this evening. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So
having us.
Glad to share our passion. We could go on for ages.
We really could. Like if this was 3 hours, I'd be like, that makes sense. Yeah, I can talk about 3 hours.
We can fill that space. I'm sure we would end up with questions from it. I would start coming up with my own at that point because I love hearing about this, ladies. So that is great. Thank you again. So last thing from me is that I invite you to check out other Alumni Association webinars that we have. These ladies hosted a very wonderful webinar tonight, and we've got a lot of other really great presenters that you can learn about things all across the board from our Miami Alumni Association. They're completely free and open to everyone. You don't have to be a graduate of Miami. You can just share it with your friends and family at any point. Our webinar website is at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. So that wraps us up, and have a great rest of your evening, everyone, and love and honor.
Love and honor.
Love and honor.